Today on Words and Numbers, Alzheimer's research.
Responses to our Social Security episode.
OnlyFans, but not how you think.
And how life can turn on a dime.
All this and more today on Words and Numbers, which is a Civil original production. Check us out at civil.com. That's CIVL.com.
Hi, I'm James.
And I'm Anthony.
And this is Words and Numbers.
Ant, what's new and exciting in your world this week?
Our episode on Social Security generated a lot of comments.
Most of them were not even hostile.
Yeah, you know, I get the sense that we've reached the point that, I don't want to say everybody, but most Americans kind of understand that this is a problem that we're going to have to deal with. So I think for the first time, you can actually start to talk about, like we did in the episode, winding it down without people losing their minds. But nonetheless, listener Eric Gartner writes and says, the sad reality is that if many people aren't enrolled in a forced savings plan, they won't save much of anything. And then we're right back to having destitute elderly people. Politically, such a condition will rapidly lead to Social Security 2 being enacted. And, you know, I'm kind of stuck in the middle here with Eric's comment, because on the one hand, I think practically speaking, he's absolutely right. On the other hand, at some point, we've got to say, okay, we take freedom seriously. And freedom includes the fact that people have to be free to make bad choices. And so, you know, if people, you're not enrolled in a forced savings plan, your savings is up to you. Yeah, there's going to be some problem, and I would think the problem lasts a maximum of one generation. I don't mean 20 years, but one set of people who don't save, and then people learn.
Yeah, that's how we got into the mess in part the first time around, right? I think in order for our plan actually to work, we might have to see a mandatory savings account of some kind, right? That this percentage of your salary must go to a retirement account. Now, you're free to manage it. You're free to choose someone else to manage it. But this percentage has to go to a savings account of some kind.
Yeah, but see, I think that second part doesn't gain us anything, because the very same people who wouldn't know enough to know that they need to save also won't know enough to know what to save with, what vehicles to use.
It could be very similar to, you know, any 401k offering, where in your HR meeting they hand you the packet and you pick, this category or this one or this one or that one. And it could be as simple as starting everybody off in a pretty aggressive fund as they age, moving them ever more secure investments. I mean, there's a number of ways you could do this, but I have grave reservations about saying, here, keep all your money and please invest it so you have retirement. I mean, look, it's the same thing every year. Around about April, I come up with the bright idea that what we really need to do is do away with withholding and have everybody write a check to the government round about Christmas time.
Right.
Which would alter things considerably. Why? Because no one would have the money.
Right, yes.
And we all know that, right? People will not plan ahead for an annual tax bill that they have to pay all at once. Well, if they won't plan ahead for that, they will not plan ahead for their retirement either.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%, except that it's a self-fulfilling prophecy that we help them because they wouldn't do it on their own, but they end up not doing it their own because we're helping them. I mean, think about it another way. We don't have to force people to put money aside to pay their grocery bill.
Right.
Why? Because, well, we understand how that works.
Well, because you have to eat, but Aunt, we don't force people to put aside money for their children's college tuition either, and that's what led to the student loan crisis. Right, because nobody had the money. The thing got so expensive that nobody could afford it.
And as we're having this conversation, I'm reminded of a story Someone told me once who knew firsthand people who had lived under communist rule prior to the decline of the dissolution of the Soviet Union. And the story was the relatives from the West would go and visit once they could, and people there would complain about this and that, quality of life and so forth. And their follow-up statement was, the government needs to do something. And the relatives from the West said, well, why don't you get up and do it yourself? And they kind of looked strangely like they had no idea what that meant. And I think it's the same kind of thing, that in this case, they lived under a system in which the government told them what to do for enough generations that they lost the ability generationally to do for themselves.
Yeah, look,
and it's not a
you're
permanent
gonna-
loss. All you need is one generation of letting them make mistakes, and they'll figure it out.
I'm not willing to watch a generation starve.
Yeah, what's the solution, though?
Oh, I don't know. And all I'm going to say here is that my orientation on this and everything is toward more freedom, not less. And yet I'm making a case against you that we have to be a little less free than your ideal world would warrant. Mm-hmm. And I do so because I know human nature, and I know the problems that human nature will introduce. The people who are going to be angriest with me about this are exactly the people who would have taken care of themselves anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And the people who wouldn't take care of themselves anyway aren't going to be listening, because they don't concern themselves with these sorts of things. And I think, we've got a problem in the middle of this somewhere. We're going to need some kind of formal answer. I think it needs to be a market-based answer. It needs to be rooted in freedom, generally speaking, but it's going to have to mandate participation.
Yeah. And maybe, James, the answer is something along the lines of, the government says, okay, you must put aside X% of your paycheck, and it must go into a S&P 500 fund, whatever it is, and that's the way it's going to be until you become educated enough in whatever way that might be. You pass an exam indicating that you understand how all of this works, and then we'll let you make the decisions for yourself. The same way that we would require you show proficiency with driving a car before we let you on the road.
Yeah, I don't think I want to get into a regime of examination on the part of the federal government. But I could see just saying, look, this is how it goes until you're 40 or whatever. I mean, given our plan, I think it would work, right? You could say, look, you will do this until your 40th birthday. And then, hey, man, we trust you to do what's right, what's in your best interest. And even if you fail, there's nothing we can do about it anyway. So go nuts. We can insure you from yourself only so long. Mm-hmm. I'd be comfortable enough with that. And I'd also be comfortable enough with something like the Social Security cap that we now have. If you make more than X dollars a year, don't worry about it.
Now that's interesting. That's interesting you say that, because we have an analogous rule in place now for private equity. If you want to invest in a company that is not traded on Wall Street, and of course, if it's not traded on Wall Street, there's all kinds of checks and information that aren't generally available to you. If you want to do that, you have to demonstrate that you have a net worth above a certain amount, and then the SEC will allow you to trade. If not, then you can't. It's the same kind of thing you're describing. But in both of these instances, whether it's your plan or it's education or what have you, we're both attacking the same thing, which is weaning people off of the government. So long as the government remains in place, people don't have an incentive to figure this out for themselves, and then you need the government in place.
I think that's right. I think that's absolutely right. And maybe what I'm suggesting would become an intermediate step, right, on the way to just washing all the rules right off the books.
Yeah, right.
Right. And I don't know if we could ever get there, but I know we couldn't start there. Mm-hmm. And
well, interesting you say an intermediate step toward washing the rules off the books, because last I saw, and this was just a couple of weeks ago, President Trump was suggesting exactly that for those private equity rules, opening up the private equity market to anybody.
I'm fine with that. Police yourselves. Figure it out.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. I want to underline, because there are people I know, and I would include myself amongst them from time to time, who are going to listen to this and say, but people need protection. And I say in response, either we're free people or we aren't free people. And if we're free people, we've got to be left alone to make our decisions and to live with the consequences thereof.
Yeah, and I would say there are some consequences that are so horrific that freedom necessarily gets curtailed. And we always end up at the same example, so I'll cut all the intermediate steps and just go right to it. You're free to drink all you want. You're not free to drive once you've had the alcohol, right? Our friend, well, you don't know who this is, but a former NFL quarterback, Mark Sanchez, is finding out all about what happens when you get too drunk and start milling about in public, right? He's got in a fight with a guy, stabbed a guy, and now he's going to prison. And good, right? But we never told him he didn't have the right to drink. Mm-hmm. There were just other things, right? And you know how dominoes fall sometime. And I'm not willing to roll the dice on something as big as nationwide retirement, because there's going to be a lot of people who will have nothing, and they're gonna starve, and they're not going to have a place to live, and it's going to put strain on their children if they happen to have any, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Get Words and Numbers on Civil.com and on Civil's TV and mobile apps. Regular episodes are free. Sign up for an annual membership to support our show and for access to member-exclusive content.
I've got something that's kind of uplifting, Ant. I think we all know at this point that for whatever else it is, Alzheimer's disease is a buildup of plaque in the human brain. And nobody quite knows what to do with that. And I say this as an incredibly interested observer, because listen to this. My mother died with Alzheimer's. Every one of her 4 siblings had it or has it. Her mother had it. Her mother's sister had it. And all of her cousins have it.
Wow.
Guess what's going to happen to me?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, look, we all know, but it might not, because some researchers from Spain and China have developed nanoparticles that break the blood-brain barrier, go into the brain, and pull the plaque out. How about that?
Are these nano machines?
They just call them nanoparticles in the bits I've read about this. So I don't think they have to be turned on. I think they just have to be injected into the bloodstream. And for some reason, they break the blood-brain barrier, which is very difficult, hardly ever happens. Yeah. But where does the plaque come from? Right? Probably a break in the blood-brain barrier. And they just haul it away like little tiny garbage trucks. And this is apparently working.
Huh. Have they done human trials?
I believe they're in them right now. Mm-hmm. And if this works, it's brains of mice right now. So next would be human trials. We may be looking at a cure for Alzheimer's, because I bet you anything that one gets fast-tracked. Probably before I get it would be my guess. If this is efficacious, as they like to say. But this brings us, Ant, to the foolishness of the week. And I want to talk about one of my favorite things, and you could talk about one of your favorite things, and we'll still kind of be talking about the same thing for a change. I want to talk about OnlyFans. Do you know what OnlyFans is, Ant?
Yes, I do.
How long have you had an account?
I neither have I'm on neither end of that transaction.
Well, we all know you're not on one end of that transaction. Good Lord, man, who would pay for that? Although I have toyed with the idea of opening an OnlyFans account for myself and just putting cameras all over my house so people can hear me ranting about things throughout the day. No sexual content whatsoever. Just me offering my unvarnished opinions. Watch me stub my toe. It would be hilarious, right? This is what reality TV should be, but
I
never
bet you
is.
people would actually pay for that.
I'm thinking they might. So if you're out there and you would pay me $5 a month to watch me moan about things, you get in touch. Anyway, the issue that comes up here, Ant, is you know how when you're on OnlyFans and you want to talk to the woman who you're watching and you're typing at your keyboard, do you do that? Do you interact?
I told you I have no experience with this.
I
know you're trying to goad me here.
I am. I'm asking you how long it's been since you've beaten your wife. Right? Okay, fine. We'll play by your rules. When gentlemen go on OnlyFans and they see a young lady that they take a fancy to, they like to type messages back and forth to the woman. But it turns out OnlyFans has a feature that a woman can opt into and pay for that will have other human beings doing the responding. It's kind of like the principle behind, that phone bank in India that you call to get tech support.
She's got a production crew behind her.
That's right. That's exactly right. And they tap. And a couple of gentlemen who were patrons of OnlyFans, unlike you, found out about this and became very upset. Yeah. And they filed a class action lawsuit against OnlyFans because they thought they were talking to the people they were talking to, not somebody in the Philippines typing away or that woman's friend in the other room or whoever ends up doing it. So they actually got an ongoing case, a class action lawsuit. But here's the good part. We haven't gotten to the good part yet that makes it the foolishness of the week. Their lawyers decided that what they needed to do was file all the papers, and they used AI to construct their pleadings.
I don't even know the punchline yet. I know it's going to be good.
The punchline is right there in front of you in a case about paying for something that you thought you were getting from a professional.
I see.
You see the professional lawyers are doing the exact same thing. And it turns out their filings with the court were loaded with AI hallucinations. They were absolute garbage. And here you go. Nobody in this entire story is doing their job.
Oh my God. All right, so I have all kinds of questions, but I guess I'll focus on the lawyers. How could they not know this? I mean, this has been a thing for maybe a year in the news of lawyers doing this, having AI write and then getting slapped.
They blamed it on a junior lawyer at the firm who had been there for 10 years. So she just fell off the lawyer turnip truck. But she had a challenging personal problem and apparently led her to cut every corner on the job, which to me sounds like, somebody's feeding a load of BS into the system. I just don't know who, nor do I really care. I just think it's hilarious that a bunch of adult performers are hiring people to be them, and then the lawyers who sue them because they're not being them are using something that is not a lawyer to do it. And I honestly hope that everybody loses.
Oh my God, that's great.
Yeah, every now and then you come across a real winner. But that's not what we're here to talk about today.
Oh, now he looks at me. This was your episode.
You're supposed to say something. I just said a bunch of things. Now it's your turn.
James and I are talking the other day about this recording, and he says, "Oh, I've got this great idea," and he starts, as in his James way, saying things, and I'm typing down notes here, and anyway, it sounded interesting to me, and we get together on this call that we are now on, and James says, "What are we talking about?" with his James blank stare, and I said, "James, you gave us the topic." "Oh, I don't remember." Fine. I started reading the notes. He still didn't remember. And now it comes time to do the episode, and he looks at me and says, "Okay."
Maybe the Alzheimer's has kicked in. Maybe. And maybe you should be a little more respectful of the mentally disabled.
What we want to talk about is I guess it would fall under the heading of the strange turns that life takes.
Look, it occurred to us, right, that Ant, you're an economist, and you spent decades teaching at colleges, and I'm a political scientist, and I spent decades teaching at colleges, and neither one of us does that anymore.
No, we don't.
And because of reasons, right? There are always reasons. But Ant used to say this thing, and I always really made a note of it when you said it, and I think it might be the smartest thing you ever said. Not like that's a big category, but it might be the smartest thing you ever said. And it was when we would visit high schools, and you would say to the students, look, they would always ask, well, how am I supposed to make a living, blah, blah, blah. And Ant would always say the same thing. He would say, look, the thing that you're going to do for the majority of your life hasn't been invented yet. And I thought, that's right. That's absolutely right. And if you really think about it, and I speak to the adults in the room right now, if you really think about it, did life go the way you planned? Fewer than 5% will have their hands up right now, because life never goes as planned. And I think the noted sage and philosopher Mike Tyson had the best of this when he said everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And life has this nasty habit of punching you right in the mouth. Mm-hmm. And you've got to change your plans on the fly and hope to God you've got the skills to back it up. So in terms of high school kids, we used to tell them, get the best education you can get a broad education, learn about technology to the extent that you can, have a decent understanding of mathematics, because that's the way the world is trending right now. Or we would tell them, get into the trades, because people have been going to college for so long, there are fewer people than necessary working as electricians and plumbers. But that's only the first bit of advice. We can't give you any more, because life will inform you as you go.
Yeah, and I think there are a couple of things here. One is of course, the thing everybody says of, get skills and a broad education, so you can respond to things that come along. But I think it's equally important, maybe even in some cases more important, that you develop a sense of resilience and openness to change.
Yeah.
So often I've seen highly talented, skilled people who, when something adverse comes along, they don't have the resilience to deal with it. And so they fall apart. When actually this thing that looks like adversity that comes along actually presents some interesting opportunities if they would grab hold of it and move forward.
And I think the thing that's lacking, to the extent that something is lacking, and I think this is more the case with each passing year, right? I think people have become noticeably less resilient over time. And to the point now where people crumble if you use the wrong word near them. Right. I mean, this is just ridiculous if you think about it. Using the wrong word. Please, put on your big boy pants and cut it out, right? But the thing that is missing is courage. People, you need to have, I mean, look, back to Aristotle, courage is understood as a virtue. And you must have it in order to live well. Now, can you live without it? Of course you can. I know many, many people who live without an iota of courage. Do some of them live well? Yes, they do. Do they miss really big opportunities? Absolutely they do. Because sometimes taking advantage of an opportunity means that you have to go so far outside of your comfort zone. I mean, so far that you can't even see the shore from where you're swimming.
Right.
And look, I have a couple of examples in my own life, right? I took a job in Iraq. Why? Because it was offered.
Mm-hmm.
I met a guy and he said, "Do you want this job?" And I'm thinking, hell yes, I do. And when I told people, they all thought I was crazy.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
I was one of them.
It was the single best decision I ever made, not in the professional realm, because it qualified me to do almost anything when I got back home.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of foresight you have to have. And then a few months ago, as you know, but our listeners probably don't, I was asked to write the libretto for an opera. I've never written a libretto for an opera before. I've only seen 2 or 3 operas to begin with, let alone sitting down to write one. My initial knee-jerk reaction, hell yes, I will.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did. It's done, and it's going to be performed in New York City next year. And what door will that open? I don't know. But it's going to open something, right?
Yeah,
and I'm sure you have very similar stories.
Yeah, and the key here is, and I could share a couple as well, but the key here is you'll identify one of these opportunities that comes along like this, because it will be so far out your wheelhouse that your knee-jerk reaction is, why would I do that? And the fact is you gain all kinds of skills and experience and outlook that you wouldn't have gained otherwise, and that helps you later on.
Yeah, when I told people about the Iraq job, I quickly realized I might as well have just told them I'm going to play professional soccer in Ecuador.
Right.
Right. There's no way for anybody to wrap their head around it. Mm-hmm. To me, it was a natural choice. I saw no option but to take it.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be crazy not to take it, right? I was in a distinct minority. And yeah, I remember even you asked me if I had my head screwed on right.
Right, yeah. Yeah, I had a similar thing. It was, I was partway through on the tenure track and doing quite well, that I was going to end up getting tenure. And a friend of mine came along, this was in the .com era, and said, "Do you want to leave academia and start a startup with me?" And it was exactly that. It was the kind of thing that any reasonable person should have said no, right? I had a wife, I had young kids, a mortgage, and all of this, and a safe job. Saying yes to him was the best thing that ever happened. And it's not the best thing because, I went into the .com era and became rich or all of that. No, the company ended up folding like 18 months later, right? And I had to go back to academia. But I came back with a skill set that I would not have had otherwise, with experience. And not just experience, but also an internal sense of, I did that, it was scary, it turned out all right, and so I'm more apt to do it again the next time an opportunity arises.
Yeah, that's right. And most things, when viewed from enough distance, do work out all right.
Mm-hmm.
It may not in the immediate short term, but if you just take a step or two back and look at the entirety of your life, you'll see it. It'll make a fair amount of sense, right? And that's a little strange because life is a series of random events, and yet the patterns emerge over time.
Yeah, and I think it's
and things build, right? You build from one point to the next, even if you're not perceiving it.
Yeah, I think there's a middle ground there, because I'll hear people say, "Well, I got where I got because of my hard work," and I'm thinking, okay,
yeah, maybe
your hard work, but there was also likely a lot of luck involved.
A lot of luck. Yep, a lot of luck.
And then I hear other people say, "Well, he only got where he got because of luck," and I'm thinking, no, that's not the case, because when luck hands you something, you've got to have the sense to pick it up and do something with it.
I mean, I'm going to dip into the vernacular of your people here. When we look at hyper successful people, there's a survivorship bias, right? We only see the ones for whom the hard work paid off. For every one of them, we don't know how many people worked exactly as hard and didn't get anywhere. Now, they might have had bad ideas. They might have had bad luck. It could be a number of things. But survivorship bias plays here.
And this is where it becomes so important that you're operating in a free society.
Yeah,
because the freer the society is politically and economically, the freer it is, the more able you're going to be to take advantage of opportunities when they come along and to recover when they blow up in your face.
When they will. Right, you will make big decisions. You will swing for the fences, and the ball won't get out of the infield. Right, this is gonna happen, and the harder you swing, the more likely it is that will happen over and over again. But you keep yourself in the game long enough, to continue a sports metaphor that you don't understand at all, and sooner or later, you're gonna drill one. Right, and you only need to succeed once. Right, you can fail and fail and fail and fail. But if you succeed one time, that's good enough. And you can ride that the rest of your life, right? So it's interesting now because we're at a time where things do seem to be changing. And I want to tell people that that's literally always true. Any point in history that you can point to, people sat around and worried about how things were changing. But for, we could go back thousands of years if you want. We can go back 3 generations if you want. There's been a certain, what we would call folk wisdom that emerges from human life and human interaction, right? We learn collectively what works and what doesn't. So in the easiest terms, we all learn what berries never to eat, right? Because some guy ate those berries once and then died. And then some other guy ate them, and he died too. So we see a pattern developing. Let's maybe not eat the berries. Okay, that's folk wisdom, right? We didn't get out the microscopes to figure that out. And folk wisdom plays in much bigger ways. For years, folk wisdom was you graduate high school, you get a good job, you get married right away, you have some kids, and then you coast until retirement.
Right.
Well, then it became graduate high school, go to college, get an even better job, wait a while, figure out who you might want to marry, then maybe have some kids later. And what was the difference? Well, the environment these people lived in. When you didn't need to breed workers for your farm, you didn't need to breed at all. And if that's the case, you could safely put it off for a while. And shock of shocks, people have children later now than they did 100 years ago.
Yeah, and you start to see that changing, the changing environment and the need for the folk wisdom to change in a couple of places right now. One work, I'd say halfway through the change, and that's our attitudes towards student loans and college in general. It was always, when I was a kid, it was always, well, they didn't ask, are you going to college? They said, where are you going to college? Because that was the key to success. Everybody knew it. That's what you did. Now we've rethought that, and we're finding it's not necessarily the key to success. In fact, in a lot of times, it just leaves you with an albatross around your neck.
If you take out $150,000 worth of loans and you major in medieval lesbian poetry, chances are you're not going to get a job good enough to pay back those $150,000 in loans, plus interest. People seem not to realize that those loans accrue interest. They literally think I'm going to borrow $150,000 and I'm going to pay back $150,000. That's not how this works.
I had a conversation with somebody about that. This person had posted and said, look, I took out, I forget what the number was, $100,000 in student loans, and I've been making all my payments on time, and somehow my loan is now $150,000. And I came back to the person, I said, this is not possible, what you're describing here. And so we delve into it, and the person says, well, maybe I didn't make all of them on time, but I made most of them on time. And then the person says,
still not possible. And then Joe Biden said that I didn't have to during COVID.
That was it, yeah. And the person said, oh, yeah. And then, of course, there's COVID years when I didn't have to make the payment. And I said, but it was accruing interest during that time.
Tick, tick, tick.
Yeah. But so that's one thing. The other thing that's coming about right now is the folk wisdom about the other key to success is owning your own home. And I think people are starting to realize, or hopefully they'll begin to realize, it's not necessarily the key to success. In fact, as we become much more mobile because we're richer and because we're more educated, it's actually a problem owning a house. It's more costly to do so if you're not going to stay in it for 15 years straight. If you're going to be moving around, rent. That's the better thing.
It's more than that, too. People don't realize the amount of money that goes into maintaining a house.
Yeah.
It's a lot. Right? I mean, the first year I moved into this one, I had to replace not one, but 2 HVAC units.
Yeah.
At a cost of $34,000.
Yeah, and you haven't even hit the property tax yet, or the insurance.
No, I barely moved in when these things happened. And, when you buy a house, you typically spend most of the money you have to do that. Yep. I didn't have $34,000 just laying around. I had to go get other jobs to pay that off. And then, the HOA, which, I've spoken of with great love, trust, and admiration in the past, decided that I needed to paint my house. And that's another $10,000 right there. $10,000 to paint a house. And then I had to replace all of the sconces on the lighting outside. I have 29 of them. They each cost $150.
Oofa. Yeah.
Right? And it just bang. And we're not even getting to the plumbing problems, the electrical problems, things that just happen as you own a house. Who doesn't have to pay for all that? Well, renters. They do and they don't, right? It's wrapped up in the rent. So they don't get blindsided by anything.
Right,
do they pay more to rent than I pay to quote unquote own? Yeah, actually they would. It would cost you more to rent this house than to buy it.
Well, hang on.
Because, no, this house specifically, right? Apple to apple comparison. If I'm going to rent this place out, it's going to be for more than my mortgage. I'm going to collect more than I pay in.
But there's still something else that renters tend to overlook, and this is particularly important if you're going to be moving every couple of years.
No,
and
that's
that
right.
is the closing costs on a house are astronomical.
They will kill you. They will.
Yeah,
kill
and
you.
if you're not going to stay in that house for probably 5 years or more.
Yeah, it's about 6 years.
Even
to
if you
break
sell
even.
it for the same amount, you're not going to recoup those closing costs.
You won't, and
renting
it's
is
a
better.
lot. It's actually a lot. So the thing in our society that gives you the opportunity to do better over time by moving from here to there, and I've moved probably more than a dozen times to take advantage of opportunities. That also mitigates against home ownership. If you're going, and the younger you are, the truer this is, right? The older you are, the more likely you are to stay in place after a while. Mm-hmm. But, you got to keep these things in mind. And just because everybody has always said, for as long as you can remember, that success means owning your own home, it might not be true.
And this goes back to this idea of folk wisdom, which is a wonderful thing, because what it is a way to distill and communicate very quickly and cleanly things that people have learned perhaps over a long period of time or at great expense, and so it comes down in the form of some rule of do this or don't do that, right? And society is, as you've said many times, an emergent phenomenon. It changes as our knowledge changes, as our circumstances changes, as the people themselves change. And because it's an emergent phenomenon, over time, some of this folk wisdom is going to remain as important and correct, and some of it is going to become overcome by events.
Well, I'll give you a quick example, right? Everybody told me when I was a boy, oh, you need to be a doctor when you grow up. And I said, why? This is, well, you're really smart, and that's a great, you'll make a lot of money, you'll be rich, and everybody will respect you. About that, doctors are not rich anymore. And very few people actually respect them in this day and age until they absolutely need one. But, look, that was great advice in 1974.
Right.
Not great advice after the Affordable Care Act.
Right, yeah. Words and Numbers is part of the Civil Network. Civil is a streaming platform dedicated to upgrading civilization by exploring better ways for people to organize, innovate, and thrive. At Civil, we believe that societies flourish when their members honor the civic equality of all people and engage with one another through cooperation. Civil seeks great minds from around the world to share bold ideas for fostering healthy, dynamic societies. By creating space for honest disagreement among people who share a commitment to building a better future, Civil offers a refreshing alternative to divisive punditry and insular echo chambers. Words and Numbers is freely available, but those who subscribe to Civil will access exclusive content, including regular live streams and conversations with remarkable people who are working to build a better society. For more information and to subscribe, visit civil.com. That's CIVL.com. Use the code Words and Numbers, that's one word, for 50% off an annual subscription. Think about the body of, we'll call it, roughly speaking, folk wisdom, rules and advice that are passed down. And some of it is going to become outdated and need to be replaced. Some of it isn't, needs to be respected. How do you know which is which? And herein lies an important linkage that, unfortunately, I think we're losing. And that's the linkage between what I'll broadly call the conservatives and the liberals. Because those two groups of people approach that question very differently and in importantly different ways.
Yeah. Which one do you want to cover? I'll take whichever one you don't want.
I'll talk about the liberals. The liberals want change. They want to make life better. So they look at things that are going on, how we do voting, how we do immigration, how we do taxes, how we care for the poor. And they're constantly saying, we should do this differently. They're looking to do it better. I'm not advocating their plans because in a lot of cases, I think the things that modern day liberals want with respect to those topics is going to lead us to worse outcomes. However, that's not true for everything they stand for.
No, and we should all want to do better. We should all want better things for the future, right? That's a rational thing to want. And conservatives want that too. Literally every human wants that. I mean, and think about it. If you really believed the rhetoric that the two sides use against each other, I mean, you'd walk away thinking that there's no such thing as a conservative who wants children to be well educated.
Mm-hmm.
That you couldn't be further from the truth. That's crazy.
Yeah, or there's no such thing as a liberal who believes in self-defense. Also
that's
stupid.
right. Of course, almost all of them do. Literally almost all. So the conservatives, and I'm dispositionally conservative. We've said this before. It doesn't exactly translate to politics, but it does kind of. Conservatives' first inclination is to not make things worse.
Yes. And notice the tension. The liberal, I want to change things to make it better. The conservative, I don't want to change things because they might become worse.
And I think both of them are well within the realm of reasonable.
Yes, they're both reasonable positions.
And I actually hold both of those positions about many, many things simultaneously. There is tension in my head about many things.
And that's the key, because if you only hold one of those positions, you're either going to destroy things you shouldn't be destroying on the liberal side, or you're going to preserve things that you need to get rid of on the conservative side.
That's probably right. Probably right. And you know, of course, there are hardcore people who are only going to hear the words liberal and conservative, and their arms are going to go straight up. They're not going to hear what we actually just said. I am both of those things. I know that you are both of those things.
Yeah.
And what we decide to do and what we advise the greater world to do when we have opinions generally is born of that friction. It's a productive friction. You should embrace it. Now, that doesn't offer an answer about how best to live, right? It just tells you the forces that are in play. And earlier, Ant, you said that there's folk wisdom that has lasted. There's folk wisdom that probably needs to go. There's folk wisdom that is dropped by the wayside. But there is one bit of folk wisdom that offers us exactly what we need as a guiding principle, and it's what we call the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do to you. And you could frame that religiously if you must. You can frame it in a secular way if you prefer. But that statement is enough to build an entire moral universe around.
It is. And think about this for a moment. You can call it respect for human dignity if you want to go that route, or you can go the route of the founders and call it equality in the
human
political
equality.
sense. Yeah.
And it's literally all of that all of the time.
I want to go back to your statement that you and I are each both of those things, the conservative and the liberal together. And I want to be careful that people don't hear that, oh, well, we're centrists. That's not the case. I would,
no, not at all.
If I had to pick one, I would say I'm much more in the conservative camp.
Oh, I'm a radical.
But here's why. Again, the conservatives' attitude is let's preserve things because we don't want to make them worse. The liberals' attitude is let's change things for the better. And there's some truth on both sides. But what I point to is the society that we particularly live in. For all of its warts, and it has many warts, it has been a successful society, largely speaking. People have progressed, perhaps at different rates, but as a body over the centuries, we have progressed. And that tells me, if indeed it's a society that is generally speaking working well and advancing, it tells me that we have a greater need to preserve things than we do to overthrow them, because largely things are working.
The philosophers would call what we have, and indeed what many countries right now have, as a nearly just society. Is it perfectly just? No. No human society ever has been or ever will be. There will always be flaws. But it's nearly just. Right? You've got a pretty good shot at living a life relatively free of massive injustice here. Mm-hmm. And that's just going to have to be good enough. And look, if you think, and we've said this on recent episodes, right? If you think, as some young people have told me, that the United States is the most unjust country in the world, all you need is a passport. You need to go to some other places. You will come back disabused of that notion in a more profound way than I can even explain to you. Because if I had to leave the country, anywhere I would pick would be less wonderful than it is here. Not to say that there wouldn't be perfectly wonderful places to go. There would be. But they would be less wonderful than what we've got here across a number of metrics. So
yeah, and I think this is
look. I need to say that I'm a political radical, right? Because what do I want? I want wholesale change all the way back to the founding principles as understood at the time.
Right.
I want them. Right. I want them to apply universally. I don't want to exclude anyone. But I don't want this massive government that we have. I want a small government that spends roughly 3 to 4% of GDP on federal government things, which is what we had until about 1910.
And so now we have, 30-some%?
Yeah, pushing 40. So it's literally 10 times as big as it should be, in my estimation. That makes me a political radical, right? I want this crazy thing. Just like the founders were political radicals. But I have the same liberal conservative tension within that context, right? Within those confines. You can't get away from it. Every single aspect of modern life really requires you to think through a number of compelling options. Well, which one are you going to choose? Should things change or should they stay the same? That's the first philosophical question to ask about anything. And there's no universally correct answer. Right?
No, there isn't. And the way you iterate to better answers is you sit down with people who you disagree with. If you're a conservative, sit down with liberals. If you're a liberal, sit down with conservatives and have honest, respectful, civil discussion. And you'll figure these things out, because each of those groups is right about a lot of things and wrong about a lot of things, and they don't know what they're wrong about.
I always was happiest as a professor when my students would say, "Oh man, I never thought about it like that." Mm-hmm. Right, as if a light bulb went off and they realized that an entire half of the American population wasn't evil at all. They just had a differing opinion.
Right. Or even better still, from time to time, when a student would say something in a lecture I'd given 100 times, and I had never thought about that thing that the student said.
Yep.
And it overthrows what I was thinking, but at the same time expands my thought. I'm now better than I was before.
Yeah, that's right. And it was asymmetric, right? I was able to have a massive influence on young people, but they were only able to have a small influence on me. Right? They would bring up points.
Yeah, well, it's the law of diminishing returns, right?
Yeah, that's right. It's not like I hadn't thought these things through, but every now and then somebody would say, "What about X?" And I'd say, "Oh yeah, what about X?" Mm-hmm. And I didn't say, "Well, I guess I'm a communist now." Right. I thought, okay, this requires an alteration of something that I thought was correct that is clearly not. Mm-hmm. So, those were good days too, because I like learning things. I'm happy enough to be wrong if I get to learn something in the process.
Yeah, and let me say it a little bit differently. I agree with you. It's about learning things, but it's about wanting to be right more than you want to win. If I'm wrong about something, I want to know it. Now, of course, it's painful to realize I know it, but I really want to. I want to get rid of that so that I am right.
And I think that's the message to kind of end on today, right? Because the world is a better place when more people want to learn more things. And when it's more important to them that they get things correctly rather than they own the libs or some such idiocy. I don't want to own anybody. I just want to talk about it, figure out what's best, and move on. And I don't think that's a particularly weird thing to want. So, stop falling for all the anger. And we'll talk about the anger factories in maybe the next episode, if memory serves. That's up on the horizon for us. But, for now, let's just end this and be happy a little bit.
And if you're a conservative, go find a liberal and shake their hands and thank them for challenging you. And if you're a liberal, go find a conservative and hug him and thank him. You'll have to hold on tight because he's going to try and get away.
Conservatives are kind of prickly that way. I don't know if most of them want to be hugged. I know I sure don't. But, at the end of the day, we always say the same exact thing. Be nice to each other. It's not that hard. You can do it. And today maybe you saw why we think it's so damn important. And it really is. So be a little kinder than you think people deserve, and you'd be amazed at the good that comes from that. Catch you next time, Ant.
See you next time, James. Words and Numbers is a Civil original podcast. We work with Civil to advance their mission of upgrading civilization by exploring ideas that promote civic equality and cooperation. We believe the most pressing issues humans face, war, poverty, debt, tribalism, arise from coercive institutions that bring out the worst in us. We at Civil look to voluntary solutions to these and other problems. We invite you to explore Civil's new platform at civil.com. That's CIVL.com.